Hello and welcome to the Fin to the Woods podcast with me, Finian Hackett. I hope you're all okay. Another week, another episode, another roundup of all the latest theatre news and a bit of gossip this week. There is a bit of gossip in this episode, which isn't mine, so I don't feel as bad sharing it because it's been in the papers. So I'm just repeating what they said, but we'll get on to that later. And also this week we've got a review of a show that I went to last week as well. But yeah, it's jam-packed, lots of casting news, especially on Broadway as well, so lots to get through, so let's get going. Let's start off by talking about a press night that I went to last week for the new musical Fly More Than You Fall. So this was at Southwark Playhouse and their new venue, Elephant. So it's called Southwark Playhouse Elephant. It's not just called Elephant, that would be weird. And it's in Elephant and Castle, funnily enough. And it's at the bottom of this very tall block of flats. And Southwark Playhouse are known, their original venue and this new venue, for being smaller venues for new shows and musicals. And I was expecting it to be slightly less cramped than it was. It was very cramped inside, even though it was a newer building. I don't know, it just was weirdly designed, especially the foyer and also the auditorium. I was sat on the end of a row and the seating mat was kind of to an angle, so I had a pole right on my knee. It wasn't the most comfortable of seats, but it was free, so I shouldn't really complain. I was there and I could see everything, just my left knee wasn't very comfortable. The main reason for my visit to see this show was to support my friends who were in it and backstage, Kieran and Zasha, who were in the show on stage, and my ex-housemate and ex-coursemate Jess, who is an ASM on the production, and she very kindly invited me and my friend Lottie to come on press night, and it was really lovely to be able to go and support her and see her for the first time in months, same with the other two as well. And that's what I really like about theatre, especially when you have friends who are also working in theatre. Not that I'm doing particularly a lot at the moment, but lots of my friends are. And being able to go and support them and visit them and just see them for the first time in months a lot of the time because they've been so busy with rehearsing, etc, etc. It's so lovely and it's a really nice atmosphere to be in. And I felt very fortunate to be there. It was really lovely. I have to say the show itself would not be a show that I would go and see. I have to admit that, because it's a show, the storyline is basically that there is a mum who gets diagnosed with terminal cancer, and the whole story kind of revolves around that and her diagnosis, her death at the end of Act 1, and then in Act 2, kind of the fallout from that. And it follows her daughter and her husband, and her daughter is an aspiring writer, and she's writing the story about birds, which is kind of interlinked throughout the story as a bit of a metaphor for what's going on in her life, and that she kind of puts her feelings in the book, and that's the main premise, roughly. It's quite a loose storyline. There isn't a lot of twists and turns and heavy thinking involved, I don't think, really, and it isn't obviously the most cheery of shows. It's, as I said, it's not a show that I would necessarily book to see, because shows about subjects like that aren't really my cup of tea. I find them quite depressing to watch and quite sad. I have to say though, I thought they handled the subject matter quite well, and there was lots of humour injected throughout, which I thought really helped keep the mood up of the audience, because it could be really, really depressing, but it was only a little bit depressing, so that's absolutely fine. But I liked the kind of interjection of the humour within the family, because in these situations, in sad situations, you do make light of it, you do make jokes within your family setting, because it's the way, as humans, we manage things with laughter and humour. So I really liked that the usage of that within the show. I thought the show itself was oddly structured, I guess, because Act 1 was about an hour and 5, hour and 10, and Act 2 was about 40 minutes. And I didn't really understand why we didn't get more of the grief of the family. Bear in mind, the daughter was the main character of the show, even though The Greatest Showman star Kiala Settle played the mum, who I think was actually kind of really underused vocally and acting-wise. I really liked what she did, but she was barely in it, and obviously we know what happens to the character, but it just felt a bit weird. Anyway, I just thought we focused too much on the terminal cancer of that sounds dreadful, but we focused too much on her diagnosis and her kind of living it. We never really got to see how it affected the family because it was kind of squeezed into Act 2 in 40 minutes when they had to grieve. And it just felt like the lengths of the acts were not, they should have been equal, I think, and we should have had equal amounts of them handling it while she was alive and also handling it after she was gone. It felt maybe a bit rushed in Act 2. And I thought some of the songs were lovely. I can't really remember many of them. I remember the title song, which was quite excessively used throughout the whole show. But apart from that, I didn't really remember any of the songs. And I think that's not an issue. But I think whenever you go and see something that you don't know, you never are going to know the songs. But saying that, like I said a few weeks back when I saw Becoming Nancy, another show I didn't really know anything about, I can still remember the songs now, and I'm still kind of singing them around the house. And I have to say I couldn't really do that with Fly More Than You Fall, so maybe their songs, I don't necessarily think they weren't catchy enough, but maybe there was too many of them. There was quite a lot, and it felt sometimes that they were just there for the sake of being there, but who knows. I really liked the visual design for it. Everything was very pastel, and that was kind of the main colour scheme for the set and the costumes, and I really liked that, and I thought it was a really nice touch because, as I said, it helped kind of lift the mood, much like that humour. It didn't drag it down. If everyone was in grey and black and it was all really dark, it just wouldn't have been enjoyable, and I don't think what they were trying to get across would have worked. So I really liked the pastels and the colour scheme of the show. I think sometimes with the choreography and the direction, it's hard in a space like that because it's basically in thrust. We were sat on the side. You can never avoid that at some point someone's going to have your back to you because that's just how it happens in those spaces. However, it seemed to happen quite a lot where we missed. There was a whole segment between Kiala Settle and the daughter where I didn't see either of their faces. I think it was when she told her that she had cancer and I couldn't see a thing. And it really kind of frustrated me because I wanted to see those emotions because it's such a pivotal point in the storyline and I couldn't really see what was happening. And I just think in a moment like that, you should try and make it so that everyone in the audience is able to see those moments. So that was a bit disappointing for me at some points. But also, I think choreographically, there was sometimes when the dancing felt like there was just too much dancing for. There was not really musical numbers that led themselves to be dance numbers, but they at points became dance numbers, and I would have rather, I guess it was more movement based or just less dancing than it was sometimes. I think there is a really good show here. I think it needs work. I think it needs more development than it has had already to make it better. It felt like a bit like Next to Normal, a bit like Dear Evan Hansen, and those shows, especially Next to Normal, are very popular and also very well written and very, very tight as a piece. And I think if you want to be like that, it's going to take a lot of work to get to that level. I think there is something there. I genuinely think there is, because I didn't leave and think, oh, that was a waste of 2 and a bit hours. I genuinely sat there, enjoyed it, and took it for what it was. And especially because it's new, you have to pay attention. Otherwise, you won't understand what's going on. You can't just sit back and relax and know you're going to enjoy it. So I think in a few years' time, if it came back with kind of renewed book, renewed songs, but I do wish them all the very best because it is a good show and the company was so strong. And I think this is always the case with every show you go and see. It's often the company that really, really hold the piece together. And I think they did. I really enjoyed all of their performances and I thought they were all really outstanding. It was such a small cast, I think of about 12, maybe 14. It's nothing really. And they all shone and had their moments to shine, and I really enjoyed that. And I liked seeing some new talent from drama schools with people who are very experienced, and it was a nice balance. So yes, if you want to catch Fly More Than You Fall, you have a few more weeks to do so. But yes, I think it was an enjoyable show, a very kind of thought-provoking and heart-tugging show, but one that still needs a little bit more work to get where it really wants to be. Right, let's crack on talking about the new productions that have been announced in the past week. So, Jamie Lloyd, who is currently getting rave reviews for his production of Sunset Boulevard over on Broadway, as is Nicole Scherzinger, it's been announced that he's set to direct Evita in London's West End next year. So he previously directed Evita at the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre a few years back, and it was a very well received production. But this news isn't an official press announcement. This has come from an interview that Andrew Lloyd Webber has done, where he said that Jamie Lloyd's directing a version of Evita next year in London. So whether that version is going to be the version that we saw a few years ago, or it's going to be a different version from the one that he did, quite possibly. But the rumours that I've heard are that it's a big star that's linked to musical theatre and is going to make a big return. And there's also some rumblings it's going to be at the Palladium as well, I've seen online. So it could be quite an event. If Sunset Boulevard and Nicole Scherzinger is anything to go by, and obviously Sigourney Weaver in Shakespeare coming up as well, he's going to get a big name, and it probably will do quite well and sell like hotcakes. There's always part of me, I love that he's looking at these productions differently and doing it in a new way, but there's part of me that would just love to see a big old fuck-off nice production of Evita, which is big elaborate sets and costumes. Same with Sunset, same with all these revivals. There's part of me that's always craving a big glamorous revival of these stripped down productions, but maybe that will happen one day. Let's not put it past Jamie Lloyd, maybe that's what he's going to do, but we'll have to wait and see. Jonathan Larson's Tick Tick Boom is going to have a revival at Theatr Clwyd in Wales from the 2nd of June to the 28th of June next year, and this has become very, very popular again, this show, after the success of the film a few years ago that starred Andrew Garfield. I've still not seen this film, and I realised this when I was doing research for the episode, that I had never got round to watching it. And The World and His Wife has watched it, but I haven't, and I now need to go and watch it after I've recorded this. I think I might go and do that. It's quite rarely produced as a show, it's not done that often, and it has always been quite a niche musical, but now, as I said, it's kind of grown in popularity and more people know of it and know the songs from it as well. They went all viral on TikTok and all other social media platforms as well, but mainly on there. But I would like to go, but Wales is quite far. That's quite a trek to see a show that I don't really know that much about. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to make that one, but who knows what I'm going to be doing next June? You just don't know. I might be living in Wales for all I know. Friends, the musical parody, based upon Friends the sitcom, will embark on a new UK tour next year. It's going to start at the Barn in Cirencester next July, before touring until May 2026. I think this is the first mention of something touring until 2026 on the podcast, I think, because that's quite far away. We're not even in 2025 yet, and we're hearing things about tours that are going to end in the middle of 2026. Quite scary, really. But it's going to places like Nottingham, Dublin, Wolverhampton, Cardiff, Southampton, many, many places across the country, north, south, east and west. So you'll have plenty of time to catch that, and you've got about 2 years to plan when you're going to go. Matthew Bourne's The Midnight Bell, which is set in 1930s London, will tour the UK again next year. So this opens at the Everyman in Cheltenham next May, before visiting the likes of Bath, York, Leicester, Plymouth, Brighton, Liverpool and many more venues up and down the country. I've never seen a Matthew Bourne show, ever. I've seen clips of The Nutcracker, because we had to watch bits of it at school for dance when I was doing like in year 8 or wherever it was, but I've never been to see a full production of a Matthew Bourne show. Isn't that bad? I'd quite like to go. I just never got round to doing it. I'll have to see what's on over Christmas this year, because he always has something on over that time, but I'd love to go. So maybe that's going to be my opportunity when that starts touring next year, to go and see that, but I really, really need to do that. Now this is interesting. So Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII, is getting a musical of her own called Anne Boleyn the Musical, and it's going to premiere at the childhood home of Anne Boleyn, Hever Castle in Kent, which isn't that far from me. I've been a few times to visit and go around the house and the grounds. It's a beautiful place, And it's where the Boleyn family were based for many years, and Anne of Cleves, another wife of Henry, took over the house a few decades after they left. And then also the Astor family from New York, very wealthy family, also owned the house at some point as well and renovated it and extended it and did this, that and the other. So it's got a lot of history to it, and for this production they're building an 1,800-seat auditorium in the grounds of the castle on the site of the old overflow car park, which apparently they stopped using a couple of years ago, they said in their press release. But it's going to be amazing, I think. Imagine doing a show to 1,800 people in the grounds of Anne Boleyn's former home while you are playing Anne Boleyn. It's running from the 2nd to the 30th of August next year, so prime time for lots of sunny weather. It'll be interesting to see if it sells, because to sell an 1,800-seat venue an hour and a half outside London, in the middle of nowhere, really, is going to be quite difficult, I think. I mean, I'd quite like to go because I like Hever Castle, and for me it's only about an hour away in the car, but it's not the most easily accessible for many places, so it'll be interesting to see how well that does, but I think I might go. It sounds like a great time, but if it rains, I will not be happy. The Pasadena Playhouse in California is going to host the world premiere of the musical version of Lyle Lyle Crocodile from the 15th of February to the 16th of March next year. This is going to feature music from the 2022 film adaptation of the book that starred Shawn Mendes, and the music was written mainly by Benj Pasek and Justin Paul, famed for their work on Dear Evan Hansen and The Greatest Showman. So I think it's going to be quite a fun family musical premiering in Pasadena next year. The stage adaptation of Prince's film and album Purple Rain is going to have its world premiere later than initially planned. So this was originally meant to be in spring of 2025, so only a few months away really, but now after kind of a very quiet period with regards to the production, it's been postponed to next fall or next autumn from October the 16th to November the 16th at the State Theatre in Minneapolis. So fans of Prince are going to have to wait a little bit longer for that to come to fruition, but it will this time next year. And I mentioned a couple of episodes ago that Sarah Snook's one-woman performance in The Picture of Dorian Gray is going to transfer to Broadway next spring, but we didn't know when, but we now do. It's going to open on March the 10th at the Music Box Theatre, and it's only going to be on for 14 weeks, so a very short period of time to see her in that play, but at least we now know when it's actually going to be opening. As well as all those new productions, as always, there's some closure announcements, 3 this week. So Fawlty Towers, the play, will close at the Apollo Theatre. It's been a big success, obviously based upon the John Cleese sitcom, and it's run for a lot longer than initially planned. It was meant to close this September, but they've extended now until the 1st of March, which is the closing date of the production. And yeah, it's been a huge success and appeals to a very big generation of people. It's always good to see shows being successful and extending. They only extended till January a couple of weeks ago, so the demand is really high. So I am surprised that it's closing, but clearly something wants to get into the Apollo. Why Am I So Single, which is the new musical from the writers of Six, Marlowe and Moss, is going to close prematurely in the West End on January the 19th. So they've cited a difficult climate for new musicals, and they thanked the producers for taking a risk on this production. And I think in some way it was never going to be Six. It was never going to reach that level that Six did, because Six had the historical value behind it. People from all over the world know about the wives of Henry VIII, and Why Am I So Single, from what I've seen and what I've heard, is very kind of British-centric, lots of references that are very British-heavy. And I have to say, apart from the title, I wouldn't know anything else about it. There isn't really any clue on the marketing. I just think it's about dating. I haven't yet been to see it, but I'm hoping to before it closes. So I think it was kind of a very localised show that was never really going to appeal to broader audiences, like tourists and things like that. So I'm not surprised necessarily. It's always sad when a show closes for the cast and the crew and everyone involved, because they end up losing their jobs, which no one enjoys. But yes, very sad, and no one wants to see a show close early. And over on Broadway, Back to the Future has announced its closure on the 5th of January after more than 500 performances. So this is now the second show to announce its closure on what is known as Black Sunday, which is January 5th, which is when tourism in New York starts to really drop off after the Christmas period. It's the same day as Suffs is closing as well. I am surprised that Back to the Future hasn't done as well on Broadway, but I think Broadway audiences aren't as receptive to these movie musical adaptations as we are here in the UK. Back to the Future's been running years over here, and over on Broadway not so much. So I think after the initial summer period of ticket sales, it's really struggled over in the States, and Christmas will be another boost before it closes in early January. But again, no one wants to see a show shut down, and I've read online that the Winter Garden, which is where it is already booked out for a play with George Clooney, and has been for months, and that was always the plan for it to go in there. Don't know if that's true or not, but I've read that online. But it's not all bad news for Back to the Future fans. The show will now open in Germany, and there are plans for it to open in Japan, and also it's going to be opening a new 100-minute incarnation of the show on the Royal Caribbean's new cruise ship Star of the Seas next year, and they've got an 8-year contract with them, so Back to the Future will live a long time sailing the seven seas. And also some good news for Starlight Express fans this week, because the show has extended again to the 26th of October 2025, so basically a year away. It's doing so well, and they'd already extended till next June, which I thought was ambitious, but now next October it must be selling like hotcakes, so big congrats to everyone involved on that production. And while some shows are getting extended over here, some shows on Broadway, one in particular, is getting shortened, and not the length of its run, but the length of the runtime of the show. And this is Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. So this originally opened on Broadway in April 2018 as a two-parter which runs at just over 5 hours, which it still is like that in the West End today. The West End is currently the only place in the world, I think, where the show is still a two-parter. So when the show returned to Broadway in 2021, I think it was, they had shortened it into one 3.5 hour long show. And now they're going to put a new version in which is under 3 hours, which is currently the touring production that is going around the US. I think it's baffling how a show can be so easily cut from 5 and a bit hours to just under 3 hours. How can you cut that much context from the show and that much content and the show still be good? I don't really understand how they've managed to do that, because the whole point of it being two parts, as far as I'm aware, was to make sure that the story was well told and spread out and you kind of understood everything. If you've then cut it down to just one show, which is 2 hours 50 minutes, how is that the same show? It must be completely different. You must have cut so many costumes and scenes and sets and everything. Truly, truly baffling, and I'm so intrigued how they've managed to do that. This past week, we've lost another really wonderful actress who starred on Broadway and all across the US, and her name was Mimi Hines, and she has died at the age of 91. And many of you won't know who she is, and that's fully understandable, but let me explain why she is such a well-known kind of presence in the world of theatre. So she toured the vaudeville circuit when she was very young, and that's where she met her husband Phil Ford, and they formed a duo that continued to perform on the vaudeville circuit. However, Mimi Hines is most famous for being the replacement for Barbra Streisand in the original Broadway production of Funny Girl in 1966, and she ended up playing the part for 18 months, so it just shows that the show still managed to go on without Barbara, which I think is really impressive. And her husband Phil appeared alongside her in the show as Eddie, but they would end up divorcing a few years after the show closed. Aside from Funny Girl, she appeared in productions and tours of I Do, The Prisoner, Governor of Second Avenue, Sugar Babies and Grease as Miss Lynch, a role she would also play on Broadway in the 1994 revival. She also appeared in the Encore's production of Follies. She toured the world in Hello Dolly, as well as productions of Anything Goes, 70 Girls 70, Pippin, and No No Nanette. So she had a wonderful career touring the country, doing all these wonderful shows and playing all these fantastic lead roles, but she'll be most remembered for being Broadway's second Fanny Bryce. Now, on to the bit of gossip that I wanted to talk about that's appeared in the papers in the last week. So, the rumour mill is flying that Sutton Foster has filed for divorce from her husband Ted Griffin after a decade of marriage. And you may be thinking, that's fine, people get divorced. I agree. But the papers are reporting that this is because she is in a relationship with her Music Man co-star Hugh Jackman. I don't believe this, and maybe I will when I see them hand in hand and they're in love and on a red carpet somewhere, because Hugh Jackman divorced his wife recently as well. So this is why this kind of conclusion has become a thing, and apparently they're overly head over heels in love and their relationship's all secret. Maybe it is, but I just did not think that Hugh Jackman would end up with Sutton Foster, let's put it that way, and I just think it's interesting. I mean, they might be a couple, and that's the thing, we don't actually know, because no one's seen any photos or anything. They could actually be together, and that would be quite a big power couple, Sutton Foster and Hugh Jackman together. Imagine that. But that is the little bit of gossip I've seen this week that I just had to talk about. I don't like being a gossip, but it was a good bit of gossip, so I had to share it. The mention of Christmas is upon us again, and this time it's another Christmas album from Jessica Vosk. So she's releasing her first full-length Christmas album called Sleigh, spelt Sleigh, and it's being released on November the 15th, and it's going to have guests such as Ariana DeBose and Neil Patrick Harris on the album as well. She did a small kind of EP of Christmas songs a few years back, and they're great, so I'm excited to hear a full Jessica Vosk Christmas album. The National Youth Music Theatre here in the UK are relocating their organisation to Birmingham, and they're going to link up with the Birmingham Hippodrome, and this is to help expand their offerings and be more accessible to other areas of the country. I believe they're currently based in London, so the move to Birmingham isn't surprising. It's not too far from London, but it's closer to those other big northern cities. And I went to Birmingham a couple of weeks ago, and I can understand why they want to move there. There's a good theatrical hub, and also there's plans to build a new musical theatre kind of national centre there as well, so maybe that's why they're moving there too. But I think that's quite good for the people of Birmingham and for the wider reach of their work. And an Irish theatre company has had its Olivier Award returned after it was stolen in a break-in. So Fishamble Theatre won the award for the play Silent back in 2016, and they are the only Irish theatre company to win an Olivier, and it was stolen in a break-in, but luckily they've returned it. I don't know where it was found, I don't know who returned it, I hope it wasn't the robber, but it's been returned and they have got their Olivier back, which I'm very glad to hear. Now on to the casting news to round off the episode. So the King's Head Theatre Panto this year is going to be narrated by none other than Dame Judi Dench, with other famous friends and patrons lending their voice to the production across the run. And also at the King's Head Theatre, a new show called Stalled, which is set in a ladies' room in Seattle, is going to be led by Tony nominee Lauren Ward, and also another actress who I just saw in Kiss Me Kate, Josie Benson. Louis McCartney will make his Broadway debut as Henry Creel in Stranger Things The First Shadow on Broadway next year. He's currently playing the role in the West End and has won great acclaim for it, and he's going to be leaving the West End production on November 10th to, I guess, have a bit of time off before he heads over to the States. The full cast for the upcoming RSC production of Twelfth Night has been announced, including Freema Agyeman, Samuel West, Gwyneth Keyworth, Bally Gill, Emily Benjamin and Norman Bowman, and that's running from the 5th of December to January the 18th. And also some of the cast joining Max Harwood in The Lightning Thief at the Other Palace has been announced, including Scott Folan, Jessica Lee, Paisley Billings, Greg Barnett and Joe Allen. White Christmas at the Mill at Sonning has announced its casting for this Christmas, including Jason Kaidy, Connor Hughes, Gabriella Williams and Nick Myers, who are going to be the lead foursome, and they're going to be supported by Mark Curry, Shirley Jameson, Shem Omari James, and my friend Natasha Kayabyab, who is going to be playing the role of Susan. So big congrats to her and everyone involved. NSYNC's Joey Fatone is going to return to Broadway this coming year, and he previously starred in Rent as Mark in 2002 and as Seymour in Little Shop of Horrors in 2004, but this time he's taking on the role of Lance in Anne Juliet from January the 21st to March the 16th. Tony nominee Michael Oberholzer will play the part of Frank in Off-Broadway's Ship Meet Fan after Billy Magnuson, who was meant to play the part, had to pull out due to unforeseen health concerns, so sending him lots of love as well. But the opening of this show is going to be moved from October the 28th to November the 18th to give Michael time to rehearse the part. Full casting has been announced for Smash the Musical on Broadway. Robin Herder and Caroline Bowman will lead the company, and Caroline Bowman is leaving Sunset Boulevard, where she's currently standby as Norma Desmond, to do this production, and other roles are going to be played by Brooks Ashmanskas, Krista Rodriguez, Christine Nielsen, a really strong company led by two fantastic women. And more casting has been announced for Sondheim's Old Friends in LA and on Broadway, so joining Bernadette and Lea Salonga will be Beth Level, Gavin Lee, Ryan McCartan, Bonnie Langford, Jason Pennycook, Joanna Riding and Jeremy Seacombe, just to name a few. Obviously, quite a few of them did the West End production, so I'm really happy that they're going over with it and Broadway get to experience their magnificent talent, especially Joanna Riding. And this week's Fin to the Woods vaguely fun fact links to Evita, which I spoke about at the beginning of the episode, and it's the fact that Audra McDonald once played Evita when she was 16 years old at the Fresno, California Dinner Theatre. That's it, another episode done of the Fin to the Woods podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to see more from me, you can follow me on TikTok at Fin to the Woods, where I'm posting pretty much every day at the moment because I just enjoy doing it. And also, please do leave me a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share the podcast with your family and friends. I would really, really appreciate it. But yes, I'll speak to you again once more next week.